Welcome to Wayward Writers. I'm senior literary agent and author Heather Cashman.
I'm author and writing coach Stephanie Bearce.
And I'm author and writing coach Nicki Jacobsmeyer.
Our mission is to nurture and enrich established writers throughout their publishing journeys.
We welcome all genres, age groups, and publishing paths through video podcasts, online webinars, in-person retreats, and more.
We're here to help you conquer your path.
We're so excited to be here with our special guest today, Nancy Churnin, and it is my absolute joy to introduce her. She is my critique partner, a dear friend, and one of the legendary nonfiction ninjas, Nancy Churnin. Nancy is an award-winning book author. She writes children's books and is known for crafting deeply heart-touching stories about real people who changed the world for the better. Stories that inspire young readers to become heroes in their own lives. Her books have earned some of the highest honors in children's literature, including the National Jewish Book Award, multiple Sidney Taylor recognitions, Texas 2x2, Junior Library Guild selections, social studies notable trade books, Almighty Girl picks, and starred reviews from School Library Journal, Kirkus, and Publishers Weekly. Her work spans powerful biographies such as Dear Mr. Dickens, Manji Moves a Mountain, Irving Berlin, The Immigrant Boy Who Made America Sing, and The William Hoy Story. Each meticulously researched, compassionately written, and always grounded in hope. Nancy grew up in New York City and lives in the Dallas area, where she continues to share stories that illuminate courage, kindness, justice, and the impact one person can make. She also provides free teacher guides and resources on her website so educators can bring those stories to their classrooms. So, welcome, Nancy. I'm excited to get to talk to you today. We're going to dive in and find out more about you.
Thank you, Stephanie, for that lovely introduction. That was so sweet.
Well, we're excited to talk to you today. Nancy, you're known about writing for real people who made the world a better place. What first drew you to writing children's biographies?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I have to say that ever since I was little, all I remember is I always wanted to be a writer. My mother was a teacher. She always read to me. And the first book she read for me was A Wonderful Wizard of Oz, chapter every night. Oh, yes. As a matter of fact, she read a chapter every night. And she said, Nancy, can we take off on Sundays? I said, only 2 chapters on Saturday. That was our deal. And I just knew I wanted to write. And those are the first books that I remember. The books I read as a child made such an impression on me because each one was like opening a door and going across space, across time, and to that most magical place, the human heart. But growing up, I couldn't really figure out how to become a children's book writer or how to become an author. But what I did understand is journalism. Growing up in New York City, we had multiple newspapers, all wonderful. I was a big fan of the New York Times, used to read it all the time. And I realized that if I wrote for a newspaper, I could be writing every day. And I would have this wonderful opportunity of interviewing people, finding people that you might not know about otherwise. Is sounding familiar? People you might not know about otherwise, people who had done something wonderful in their community. And I love finding those kinds of stories and writing about them for the newspaper. And my transition to becoming a children's book author, it was interesting because that came out of an article I wrote for the newspaper. It was when I was working for the Dallas Morning News. And I had written about this deaf baseball player, William Hoy. It was one of many stories I had written. But in this case, I got a thank you email from a man in Columbus, Ohio, which I thought was a little unusual, being that this was an article for the Dallas Morning News. And it turned out the man was Steve Sandy, who was deaf, who had everything written about Hoy on Google Alerts. And we started emailing back and forth, and he shared with me his passion to get William Hoy in the National Baseball Hall of Fame, because he pointed out to me that this might surprise you. Guess how many deaf players there are in the National Baseball Hall of Fame?
None.
When I ask the kids, that's because you're a smart and a little bit cynical adult. But when I ask the kids, they say 500, 1,000, a million. I say, these are really nice answers. But of course, Stephanie is right, as she so often is. And the answer is 0. And so I had this moment, this flash. I said, what if I write a children's book about William Hoy? And I read it to the kids, and if they agree he should be in the Hall of Fame, they'll all write letters, and we'll melt their hearts, and he'll get in. He says, great. I said, I can only do it if you help me with the research, because very little was out there about William Hoy. And Steve said, absolutely, because he is a historian, especially a historian of deaf history, and particularly of Hoy. And he gave me a flood of newspaper articles, put me in touch with the family. It was just so many riches, but it wasn't out of books. It was newspaper articles. And I told him I'd write it in 2003. The book comes out in 2016. Took me 13 years because I didn't know what I didn't know about writing a children's book. But it's a good thing. I admit I'm stubborn, but also I had made a promise. I made a promise to Steve, made a promise to Hoy, that I just wouldn't stop until that book came out in the world, and that became my first book. And that really set me on a course, because I realized that there were a lot of people out there like William Hoy. I was used to writing articles about people in my community. Now I wanted to write about people in the world who people might not know about otherwise, but people who made a positive difference in the world.
I love that.
Yeah.
I just love that. That's why I love your stories.
Yeah, they're excellent. We're a huge baseball family. That's one my boy would sit and listen to. He loved that, the William Hoy story. Because I would say to him, like, can you imagine playing this game and, you know, and not being able to hear? Like, how would that change it for you? Your book, just all your books, they're lesser known people, but they bring up these organic conversations with family. So how in the world do you discover the people you choose to highlight and write about?
As with William Hoy, that was pretty much handed to me. And that, you know, but I'm also really proud of is I'm still friends with Steve today, and his family, the Hoy family members, they all are so thrilled every time this gets attention. So yeah, that's been wonderful. And if I could just tell you one more thing, it just came out in Spanish. I'm so excited. I had a story into William Hoy.
Congrats.
Korean and Swedish, but it just came out in Spanish. So how do I find these people? That's a very good question. William Hoy came out. The natural thing to do would have been just to think about some other lesser known person. And I was thinking in that direction, but I came upon a newspaper article about a guy who had spent 22 years chiseling a path through a 300-foot mountain so the kids in his poor village in India could get to the school on the other side. People could get to a doctor. And I went, that's crazy. I don't even believe that's true. And being a journalist, I had to go look it up and interview people. And in fact, it was true. And I was so moved by that, that I said, I've got to write this story. And I think it's because even though this man lived in India, and on the surface, he seems very different from me, that's what I'd gone through with the William Hoy story. It was like chiseling a path through a mountain. It took me 13 years from promise to getting that book in the world. So that I realized that was nothing compared to 22 years. And that became my second book, Manji Moves a Mountain. It was very personal to me. And again, not a lot had been written about him. He was known in India, so I interviewed a professor who went there every year with her students, knew all about him. I studied videos, I studied articles, and that turned into Manji Moves a Mountain. The stories come from all different places. When it came to Charlie Takes His Shot, I always admired Jackie Robinson, who had broken the color barrier in baseball, but I wondered, well, who broke it in golf? And then it turned out it was Dr. Charlie Sifford, who was a friend of Jackie Robinson's and wanted to do for golf what his friend Jackie did for baseball. And indeed, Jackie Robinson is in the book, which I always like to point out to the kids because they get to see another side of Jackie Robinson. the person who's already achieved his dream, but then dedicates himself to helping the dreams of other people come true, people like his friend Charlie. And he was a big part in why Charlie eventually got the chance to take his shot. So it's just, I try to open myself up to these stories, and sometimes they come out of questions, sometimes they come out of curiosity, sometimes I've just read an article, but what has to happen is it has to resonate with me. I have to feel it deeply. When I was a journalist, I was not only writing feature stories, I became a theater critic. And one thing I learned about being a theater critic, I interviewed a lot of actors. And to me, a writer is like an actor. At least it's how I approach it. So what does an actor do? An actor studies everything they can about their subject. And at some level, they have to feel what their subject feels. Of course, you're not that person. There are differences, but that place you intersect is the place you're able to write the story. It's the place you're able to present that person on stage.
So cool.
It is. It's a beautiful way of looking at it. So when you begin these new projects, and before you maybe get to the point where you have this crossing of emotion, what does your research process look like, and is it different for each one, or do you basically begin at the same place?
It's pretty different. It's different for each one because it depends on where the material is, how much material there is about the person. So it was, again, like with William Hoy, I had to do most of my research through newspaper articles and through baseball experts like my friend Eric Nadel, who was a Hall of Fame announcer for the Texas Rangers. My friend Steve Sandy, could not have done it without him and his support, and my friends in the deaf community. But there weren't a lot of books to read, right? Charlie, Dr. Sifford, he actually had a self-published autobiography that I read. And then there were family members. When I wrote Irving Berlin, which Stephanie mentioned earlier, oh my goodness, he didn't write an autobiography because he said, my autobiography are my songs. So I studied the songs, but there were biographies written about him. It was more of a wealth of material. Plus, the man lived 101 years. So there was a lot more on him than other people. And then sometimes there were different challenges. Martin and Anne is a parallel story. So I wasn't looking to write a biography of Anne Frank or a biography of Dr. King as much as I was looking for the parallels in their lives. Different places, yes. Beautiful Shades of Brown. There weren't books about Laura Wheeler Waring. So I went to where her paintings were in the Smithsonian and talked to curators there. Yes, it's all different. What is the same is I have to really understand why I'm writing the story and what the heart of the story is. With William Hoy, one of the keys here is I'm not just simply telling a story about a baseball player, but what was key here was that he was a proud deaf man. And he used his gift, his knowledge of sign language, to change the game for the better. And so the book had to start with signing, with his mother cheering for him. It had the middle where he faces this big challenge, people trying to talk around him or trick him because he couldn't hear them. When he gets the idea of teaching the umpires his language, sign language. Safe, out is American Sign Language. And then the emotional moment at the end where the fans who love him try to show them their love by cheering for him the way his mother cheered for him. Sign language. So that was the heart of that story. I have to find the heart in each case, the way the person relates to the world. And then you can't put all the information in a book, but it's the information that supports that structure of the story, if that makes sense.
It does. I know you do tons of research on all of this. Can you just, when you're doing research, can you explain to our audience how you ensure all of your accuracy and your cultural sensitivity? Because obviously you're working with so many different cultures, the deaf culture, Indian culture. How do you work with that?
These are great questions, and these are challenging questions. I would never have written the Williams Boy story without the support and encouragement of my friend Steve Sandy and the people he put me in touch with in the deaf community, and with baseball experts, and with the Hoy family who gave their blessing to this. That was very important. Dr. Siffert's family is so happy with this book. This was like, I had such a wonderful experience with this. It's actually, I think, on their Dr. Charlie Siffert page. They have this book on there. And this book is in hardcover, as Hoy was originally, and then they put out a paperback. And they told me when I put out the paperback, when they were doing the paperback, the publisher told me, if you need to or want to make any changes, feel free. So I went to the Siffert family, to Charles Siffert Jr., and I said, you know what, I have an opportunity to make any changes if you want any at this point. And he said, no, it's perfect, just the way it is. And that meant everything to me. So I have stayed friends with all the people that I have interviewed. I have stayed friends with the families whenever that is possible. When I wrote Dear Mr. Dickens, and this is a true story of a Jewish woman who spoke up to Charles Dickens about some of his anti-Semitic stereotypes, like Fagin and Oliver Twist, and said, you can do better. And because of her, he wrote his first book with a positive Jewish character, Mr. Rhea. And Rhea is actually Hebrew for friend. And yeah, so that was wonderful. So this book, I had to be very careful because there was a lot of Dickens scholars. Now, I have to, it was so funny, was that my publisher didn't even know. They were afraid about cultural sensitivities. They said, you're not Jewish, are you? And I said, actually, yes, I am.
Surprise!
No, because I said, yes, I am. So there you go with that. Also, you had to get the Dickens exactly right. And I worked with 3 Dickens scholars. And because everything was verified by them. And they were very picky, not only about the words, but I still remember this, that in the beginning when Dickens used to publish his books in magazine form, and I think originally the illustrator might have made this green, and they said, no, it is blue. And they said, and the dimensions are, and they gave the exact dimensions. He was like, okay, that's fine. We're gonna get it exactly right. And they're all thanked in the back of the book. And I think that's why they actually made an educational program for this at the Charles Dickens Museum in London. I was so very proud of that. I try to be very careful and respectful. And if I'm in a situation where I want to write about somebody and I don't get that support, I let that go. I just let that go. I wouldn't do it without the support. But most of these stories are about people no one else has written about. And the people who have supported me are so happy to have me write about them.
That's wonderful. That support is huge, even if it's the same culture as you. They're all different stories, right? And they're not ours. We're just trying to share them with other people. So that's wonderful. I didn't know all those things that you had done. And it's just, it speaks to how you get to the heart of the story, and you're able to do that. So I always find this tricky myself with nonfiction. How do you decide what is going to make it into the narrative and what you have to either put in the notes or maybe share at a school visit or maybe not at all? How do you determine that, Nancy?
Well, again, you guys ask such wonderful questions. So I'll just tell you something you'll find a little bit amusing, since you're all professional writers here. Remember I told you it took me 13 years to get William Hoy from promise to book? Well, my very first versions of the William Hoy story were about 3,000 words or more. And I thought, and every word I thought was essential.
Start somewhere, right?
What?
I said, they're all darlings.
They are, and I had a lot to say about him. I have so much to say about him. I have to tell you that always a challenge. I present it differently in different schools because I have so many stories that didn't make it into the book. And they are great stories. I am telling you, they are great stories. You will love these stories. There's a story about his sense of humor. There's a story about his honesty. There's a story about his family. I've got so many stories. But what I learned when I wrote this was I had to again find the unifying theme, which was the gifts he brought to the game as a proud deaf man, the sign language that anchors the story. And I also realized I had to stay focused on him. I couldn't tell all those other stories. I was going to have to save them for school visits. I couldn't even get all of them in the back matter because I tried.
No, those like select special stories, though, they're such great for school visits. Those kids feel so special, and like the people that showed up at your event, sometimes like that just enhances the magic of what we do in front of people. So
it's absolutely true. But it's always a choice about what I share, because I also, with this book, I share some sign language with them. They just want to ask questions and answers. So if they have fewer questions, I get to share some more of the stories. But this one drove me crazy because I loved writing. This is about Catherine Lee Bates, who wrote America the Beautiful. I had so much to say about her, and it broke my heart that I couldn't slip in the fact that she actually invented Mrs. Claus. She did. She wrote a poem about Mrs. Claus, and he says, I am going to write that book
there
too.
You go.
It just couldn't fit into this one. This one was focused on why she wrote America the Beautiful. And that I had to stick with that. It was like the same way with, I told you, Irving Berlin lived 101 years. And there are actually a couple of other picture books out there about Irving Berlin, and they're all accurate. They're great. But my book stayed focused on why he wrote God Bless America. And it's just, you see him coming in on the boat, and he sees the Statue of Liberty, and he wants to write a song just for her. And this is what motivates him. This is what he writes, all these wonderful songs over time, but he never forgets coming to this country as just a young refugee looking for a home, and this country that takes him in and gives him a home and opportunities. He serves his country in World War I and World War II, not on the battlefield, but they have him teaching the other soldiers how to sing and dance.
Oh, that's so needed. It's very important for their morale.
It is. And then he pulls out this song. He pulls out this song when his country is going to war. On the eve of World War II, he wants to give people courage and strength. And that was a song that he'd had in his mind since he's a child. God bless America. And it's his prayer. And because it is a prayer, and he was a son of a cantor. If you know anything about the Jewish religion, the cantor is the one who sings the songs in the synagogue, sings the prayers. You know, if you ever see a video of Irving Berlin, you realize he did not have the voice of his father. Reading voice, but his skill was in writing the songs, but he could sing it, because I have video of him singing it on the Ed Sullivan Show. It's
what
amazing.
A treat.
But he wrote it, and because it was his prayer for the country, this is a man who was very careful about money, but he never took a penny for God Bless America. He gave all the royalties it earned, which was millions of dollars, to the Girls and Boy Scouts of America.
Wow.
And that's how it ends. So it begins with him wanting to write that song. It ends with that song, what it does for America, how it gives them courage and strength, and who he gives all of the money it earns to. The future of America, to children like the child he was when he came to this country. So yes, how do I figure out what to leave? There were so many things I had to leave out again. The man, he wrote the soundtrack to America. There were so many songs I could have written about. There was so much about his life and what he did and all the details. But I kept it focused on that dream of thanking his country, serving his country, and how that song showed his love for his country. But yeah, a lot of things left on the cutting room floor. but that's the life of picture book writers. Stephanie, you write middle grade, so you get to put a little bit more into
I
those
know.
books,
That's a good thing for me. I can't hate cutting all those stories out.
So, one of the things that I love about being able to be an agent and choose books to represent is that I love empowering children. And a lot of your books, or all of your books, have this kind of empowerment theme in them. Is this something that you intentionally build into every project, or is this something that just happens because the people you focus on have been active in some way to empower other people?
That's like a real chicken and egg question, isn't it? I only like to write about people who have changed the world for the better. So there are a lot of people out there that you can write about who are just very interesting people and have interesting stories to tell. But for me, that's not enough. I also want that person to have changed the world for the better. What is really important to me is that the experience doesn't end on the last page, but the kids see this is a true story about someone who made the world a better place. What can I do to make the world a better place too? And so I always have a project that goes with every book. And William Hoy did was he really brought the deaf and the hearing communities together in a very impactful way. And the fact that he's not yet recognized in the National Baseball Hall of Fame, he's in other halls of fame. I want the kids to know that their voices matter. So I encourage them to write letters to the Hall of Fame. And they are all over the country. They're writing letters to the Hall of Fame. But for all of the books, there are projects. So in Dear Mr. Dickens, this is a woman who wrote a letter to Charles Dickens, and she changed his heart for the better. So again, this is used also. Can you write to someone in a position of influence in your community? Speak up, tell them what you would like to see changed for the better. So this is also encourages letter writing. Wheeler Waring, one of the reasons that she wanted to paint was that she didn't see faces like hers on museum walls. She developed her art, and her paintings are now in the Smithsonian, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Brooklyn Museum, all over the country. So I say, are you represented? Is your community represented on museum walls? Draw pictures of people, whether it's you or your community or anyone you feel is left out. Let's put those pictures in the world. Yes. One of my more recent books is A Teddy Bear for Emily and President Roosevelt too. And this is about an immigrant family that wanted to thank the kind President Theodore Roosevelt for saving a bear on a hunting trip. But also, you find out he was kind to immigrants. So they wanted to thank him in their language, which was the language of toys. They created the first Teddy's bear, Teddy apostrophe S bear, to thank the kind President Theodore Roosevelt. And I ask kids, this is how President Roosevelt showed kindness. This is how they showed kindness. How can you show kindness? And some kids are taking it by creating teddy bear drives or stuffed animal drives. But it's really any way you can show kindness to others and let them know that they're cared about. So, yes, there's always a project because, again, I want the kids to know that they can be heroes in their lives as well. Very often the people I'm writing about, I like to say them, were they the biggest? Were they the strongest? No. Where were they strong? In their hearts. Where can we all be strong? In our hearts. And what are the things that we can do that make a positive difference?
You have some great stories about the books and the things that you do with the kids. Which one of the stories has been your biggest lesson? Which one taught you the biggest lesson?
Wow. I'd probably just have to go back. I learned something and I'm changed by each of them. It is one of my favorite poems of all time is Ulysses by Alfred Tennyson. And he says in it, I am a part of all I have met. And we are all changed by everyone we have met in this world, people, but also by the people we have written about. And I've learned something from each one because they're all part of my heart. I would have to say this was my first one. And because it took me 13 years.
13 years of lessons, right?
It taught me so much. It taught me so much about perseverance, but also humility, about how to know. I just started with so much hubris because, again, I was a professional writer, a journalist for many years. I was used to seeing my articles in the paper just about every day. It would take me like an hour and a half to write an article. I was a little confident, let's say. I said, I'll write this. It's not that long. It's going to take me an afternoon. And then all those rejection letters. Rejection letters I got over the course of 13 years is phenomenal. So at that time, I think when I was working, there weren't as many classes or courses or groups out there teaching the art of children's book writing. And as they started to emerge, I started to sign up and I started to study and I started to read books about the craft. It took me a long time before I even realized I needed help. And so you learn to laugh at yourself. And I'd always prided myself on being a lifelong learner. I still am. I love to learn. But it really helps to fail. It does. To let you know what you don't know and to get better. So I think I learned, and this is not one of these stories. Stephanie, you're in my critique group. So not one of these stories emerges full blown like Athena from the head of Zeus.
No, it's actually
right?
lovely to see the metamorphosis of it.
Exactly. They metamorphize, but that's where I first learned about it. I also learned that each one will take the time it takes. So some of them came out pretty quickly. Charlie was one of my faster ones. But Dear Mr. Dickens, I started that in 2013 and it didn't come out till 2021. So I also learned to continue to have patience because some of them will flow quickly. And some of them are more challenging to find the structure, the shape, to make it kid-friendly, and yet get across what you're hoping it will get across. But yeah, that's probably because it was my first book and it was so long. It taught me patience. It taught me humility. And then I like to say to the kids, if I'd given up after 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, would I even be in front of you today? And would any of these other books behind me come into being? No, you have to keep going. And it's a reminder that I wrote a chapter book about Thomas Edison, and I believe he said, you don't fail until you give up. As long as you keep going, it's a question of how long it takes you to succeed. And I can't tell you how helpful that has been to me.
Absolutely. Good advice for all aspiring authors out there.
Yes. So speaking of advice, Nancy, for writers who are thinking about breaking into children's nonfiction, what would be your best craft advice for them?
To say what would be helpful to me, if this would be helpful to other writers, the single most important thing is to write about somebody that you really love. And that's what's helped me. There are a lot of biographies out there. And there are biographies out there that I am glad are out there, but they aren't the ones I would have written. And that's fine because the kids need all the books. But you have to find the one that speaks to you, that resonates with you, that you kind of understand on some kind of a gut level. And there's something you really want to share about this person. I know we're talking about craft and people want to be published, but it can take you down. I don't know if it takes you down the most helpful road to try and figure out in the market, this is the kind of biography that they want. That's never worked for me. I have to find the story I want to tell and the person I want to share. And that's why I've said that each and every one of these people, I absolutely love. They're a part of my heart. They're like my friends. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Some people are shy. And they say, oh, how can I reach out to the family or the friend? You just got to do it. And they say, what if they shut me down? And I go, they shut you down. You got two choices. You can write it anyway, or you could just move on. I personally would move on because I feel we need all the support system helps me. And I want to feel like the story I write is supported. And there are stories I've shut down because they didn't want it, or they wanted to do it their own way, and fine, that's their story and they can do that. But every single one of these stories that I've written was with the support, and the family is thrilled, and I still get emails and calls, and you just got a video call the other day from two subjects of one of my stories thanking me so much for writing their story that they could now share with kids. And that's how I like to do it. I like to extend my community of friends and support. And so, yeah, just don't be afraid of things. And if it doesn't, as I said, if it doesn't work out, there are so many stories out there. Maybe that wasn't your story. And then just try and get it right. But as you're trying to get it right, you just can't lose sight of the heart of it. So you can drown in facts. It's something I learned as a journalist too. You can have so many facts that you can't find your way through the story. Don't lose sight of why you're writing it, what you're trying to say. You're not going to get every fact in there, but as long as the facts that you have there are correct and you can support it and your context is correct, right? If you think about an impressionist painting, the beauty of an impressionist painting is they don't paint every leaf on the tree, do they? No, but they give you enough color so that you have that sense and you can feel that tree, right? And that's what you're doing. A picture book is like an impressionist painting, and it's also like a poem and a song.
That's great advice. Thank you.
I think it's wonderful, this program that you're doing, and it's so helpful to writers, and I'm so happy to be part of it.
Thank you.
Okay, you want to start the rapid fire, Heather?
Sure, absolutely. So just a few words. Answers, all we need. Although people really struggle with that.
Sorry, writing short is... I started with a 3,000 word manuscript. I was so puzzled by those early rejections.
Love that. That's the perfect story for everyone needs to hear that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. What is your favorite research rabbit hole that you've ever fallen into?
I think it was with Catherine Lee Bates. I just really, and I think one day I will write that story about Mrs. Santa Claus, because it just killed me leaving that
I
out.
hope you do. I want that story.
It's a book. It's a book bundle. That's how your agent should pitch it.
There you go.
I don't know the agent world, but that sounds like a good marketing strategy to me.
Oh gosh, she wrote so many wonderful poems, Catherine Lee Bates, and there was just so much to say about her. She was amazing.
That's fun.
But, I stayed focused. I had to stay focused.
So, which historical figure do you wish more kids knew about?
All of them. There is so many, and there are so many I'm still writing. But I have to say, I've been presenting William Hoy a lot. This is the beginning of Deaf History Month, and it's been so wonderful to present William and to teach kids a little sign language so they can enter the beauty of that world. But really, as I said, I only write about people that I really want the kids to know about. They're all so very special to me. I had to tell you, I know you just want short ones, but I remember this one also got so many rejections. It ended up getting more awards than any of my other books. This is the one that won the National Jewish Book Award, Sidney Taylor Honor, Junior Library Guild, et cetera, et cetera. So many. You wouldn't believe how many times it got rejected because people said, kids don't know who Charles Dickens is, and they certainly don't know who Eliza Davis is. And I went, I finally found an editor to take a chance on it, and it just... And then it was really...
It paid off big time.
That's great.
And so many people said, oh, yeah. And they were just so surprised it was ever rejected. As funny as could be.
What is the book you'd love to write someday but haven't yet?
You mean besides Mrs. Claus? Mrs. Santa Claus. Oh my gosh, there are so many. And there are so many, and I just hesitate to go into detail, but I have some manuscripts that Stephanie has seen that haven't found homes yet.
I will.
Thank you, and I love them. I love them dearly, and it almost feels like you jinx them a little bit to overtalk them before they find a home. But there's some stories I felt I had so much more to say about that I have wanted to try some middle grade. And that is a special dream of mine.
Come to the dark side with me. Come on. You can do it.
Yes. Stephanie makes it so appealing. No, I've been thinking about that so much. It's like, it really is drawing me. And that is where I want to go next.
More words.
Exactly. And more characters and more interactions. The picture books are so focused on that one main character, which is wonderful and rewarding. But I'm really drawn. Even some of the subjects I've already written about, I'd love to write in middle grade form.
That would be exciting.
Yeah.
So what brings you the most joy in a school visit?
Oh, when I see the kids' eyes light up, when the kids feel encouraged and empowered. And I always read these books very interactively. So as I said, one of these questions I ask, like, I'll ask it about William, I'll ask about Charlie, I'll ask it about Manji. I'll say, were they the biggest? Were they the strongest? And I'll say, of course they weren't. And I'll say, where were they strong? And they'll say, in his heart. And I say, can we all be strong in our hearts? And then when the kids share with me the ways in which they're making the world a better place, like for instance, the project with Manji, we talk about how Manji moved an actual mountain to help his village. But every time we help others, we move mountains. How are you moving mountains in your community? And they share with me the wonderful things they're doing, whether they're collecting food for the hungry or warm jackets in the winter for those who need them, whether they're volunteering at animal shelters so that the animals don't feel lonely. And these are the things that really warm my heart when they are putting good into the world, because that's why I write these stories, to break down the walls between us and to have kids know that they can make a difference, that they can move mountains too. And also, I always end my William Hoy presentations with how it took me 13 years to write that story, but also William didn't give up. And I talk to them about how their dreams are important. And don't let people laugh you out of your dreams. You don't fail until you give up. And the world needs your dreams. And when I see that resonate with them, and that they're thinking about their dreams and what they can do and what they can bring to the world, that's what makes me so happy. And that's what gives me hope for the future.
That's awesome. And it's a great reason to be a writer, isn't it?
Absolutely. And a writer of children's books, because the children are our future. And it's a tough world, and it can be a scary world. And sometimes they can be inundated with not only with the fear of what's going on, about things they can't control, but sometimes even fellow kids can be cruel. They can laugh at you, and what they might think is a ha-ha funny joke to a child who hears it might be devastating, and they may want to give up on what they are hoping for. So I'm there to tell them, don't give up. And don't worry about people laughing at you. It's like, I love to tell them the story about Manji. Manji was interviewed, and the interviewer asked him, they said, what did you feel when people laughed at you when you're chiseling that mountain like for 22 years? And they laughed at him. And he said, that made me want to do it even more. So I said, go out there, and if somebody laughs at you, just go and do it even more. Don't give up. And then you'll make a path through that mountain.
That is perfect advice for all of our wayward writers out there. Thank you, Nancy, so much for joining us today. It was such a pleasure to get to talk with you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to talk with you, and thank you for all that you're doing for the writing community. You know, I hope somebody out there listening, it gives them hope, and that so that they won't give up on that manuscript after 5 years, after 10 years, after 12 years. And if it takes you longer than 13 years, just it takes as long as it takes. Keep going. We need your stories.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Wayward Writers.
Let's connect. Find us at waywardwriters.com, X, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook.
See you next time. Conquer your path.